Good evening, North, Central and South America. Good morning, Asia Pacific, and I hope Europe and Africa, you've had a fine evening. Welcome to 24 Hours of Pass Summit Preview. We're excited you could join us today for Chris Shaw and John Morehouse's session, Real World 2014 Migration Path Decisions. This 24 Hours of Pass event consists of 24 consecutive live webcasts. Sessions will be recorded and posted online about a week after the event. My name is Chris O'Neill. I'll be your moderator for this evening, and I have a few quick introduction slides before I hand over to the reins to Chris and John. They will speak for about 40 to 45 minutes. Then we'll move on to a Q&A where you can ask any questions you may have. If you do have any issues, type your issue into the question pane and someone will assist you. To maximize your screen, use the Zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Feel free to enter your question in the Q&A field at any time. The questions pane is located on the right side of your screen. Once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I'll read off your questions to the speaker. Note, there is a short evaluation at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to complete it. It will show up on your screen. I'd like to take a moment to thank our event partners. The staging of 24 Hours of Pass would not be possible without their support and dedication. They're the reason that this event is free of charge. Thank you to our presenting sponsors, Microsoft and Dell Software. So, as you all may know, this 24 Hours of Pass is a preview of the Pass Summit 2014, the largest conference for SQL Server and BI professionals. 5,000 attendees, 2,000 companies from 52 countries. Summit is a time for you to share, connect and learn with your peers and the industry partners. Pass Summit is not only a week of intensive learning and knowledge, sharing strategic insight, it's also your opportunity to network and rub shoulders with industry experts. Taking place in Seattle, Washington State from November the 4th to the 7th, Pass Summit will feature over 190 world-class sessions across 5 topic tracks. These 24 Hours of Pass sessions provide a mere glimpse of what you can expect from the Pass Summit. Find out more at www.passsummit.com. and be sure to register by September 26 using the discount code 24HOT14. You'll get $200 off the registration fee. It is now my pleasure to present to you the speakers of the hour, Chris Shaw and John Morehouse. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Chris. So if we go ahead and move on to the next slide. So just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Chris Shaw. I'm a senior consultant with Extevia. We do some virtual DBA type services. I've been a DBA for over 19 years now, and you can see that I've had a number of organizations that I've worked with. I recently received my sixth SQL Server MVP award, and you've got all my contact information down there along with my Twitter, and if you want to read more about my blog, you can find that at chrisshaw.wordpress.com.
And just to introduce myself, my name is John Morehouse. I'm a database architect with Farm Credit Services of America based out of Omaha, Nebraska. Basically, in the short story is Farm Credit Services of America, we help service the rural America in finding financial solutions for their needs. I've been a SQL Server DBA for about 7 years now. I'm a past regional mentor for the Midwest region. I'm one of the founders of the Omaha SQL BI user group here in Omaha. As a joke off of Chris's outstanding achievements, I've co-authored 0 books, still on my project list to complete. You can see my contact information there. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter, email me, or you can follow me at my blog at sqlrs.com.
So the point of the session today, or kind of the direction that we wanted to go, is to show you that with every single, or not with every single, but with most situations that you run into with SQL Server, you can see that there's different ways that you can do each of these things. For this specific presentation, we want to show how you can take two different professionals and how we may address how you would actually upgrade a SQL Server. It could be to 2012 to 2014, but the idea more is what sort of general path that we take and what you may see from one individual versus another individual. But we're going to start off with just some general overall upgrade tips. When you start looking at potentially upgrading your SQL Server, specifically production SQL servers, there's a few things that you're going to want to make sure that you do right off the bat. The first one is you're going to want to make sure that you practice your upgrade. It's never a good idea to go into a situation and just start upgrading and trying to find where the mistakes are in your production environment. So obviously you want to take a swing at this, try to set up a test server, and today it's even easier than it's ever been when you have the options of virtual machines and you set up a server, make it look just like your production one, and step through the upgrade process. You can look at a couple different methods on how you can upgrade, and you'll get a good head start. You'll notice that once you start the ISOs, or you start digging into the installers on these, if you go through some of the documentation, you'll see an upgrade advisor. What this is going to do is it's going to give you the ability to look at some of the new features and how it's compatible with what's already on your server. Highly recommend using the upgrade advisor. It may potentially save you production problems and give you a little bit of notice and give you some ideas on what you need to fix before you move in that direction. In addition, a lot of people may not realize that the distributed replay controller is going to give you the ability to even put a load on your new server or on the new version in comparison to what you're running into your production environment now. This session isn't specifically about that, but it's a great idea that you know exactly what you're going to get into before you actually step into the upgrade. And have a good understanding of what your maintenance window is. When we refer to maintenance window throughout the presentation today, what we're referring to is the actual downtime that you're going to be taking when you start to roll this upgrade. You'll see later here, and I think the next slide, we start talking about the difference between an in-place upgrade and a side-by-side upgrade. And one of the reasons in particular we're not going to talk about an in-place upgrade is because of the impact on that maintenance window. But it doesn't matter which method you choose, whether or not you use one of the methods that we talk about or one of the other potential methods. There's some things that you need to just make sure that you're paying attention to. Disk space requirements. Make sure that you're hitting up on your DR procedures before you even start. And how are your DR procedures going to be affected in the middle of your maintenance window? It may not seem like a very common occurrence, or you may be saying, well, you know, we're in the middle of an upgrade, so I don't necessarily need to make sure that I've got the DR procedures covered. But I think that, you know, it's probably more important at that point in time than any other point in time that you know what the different options are and you know how to get back to good or back to a production environment where you're back online and hosting your normal business activity. And then you can always upgrade using the SSI. Oh, I don't remember why we put the SSIS package on there. John, to you? That's right. We'll go ahead and skip that one.
Yeah, partly was.
So the first thing that I want to talk about is that there's two major upgrade theories or ways that you can do this. You can do an upgrade in place, and what that basically means is you're going to let the SQL Server engine upgrade itself using the installation tools that you have. You can find a lot more information about this using the link in the slide.
Hey, Chris, this is John. I don't know if you can hear me, but we can't hear you. Chris O'Neill, can you hear me?
Yes, John, I can hear you.
Okay, looks like we're having some audio problems for Mr. Shaw.
It looks like I had a network issue. Am I back on?
You're back on.
You're back on, sir.
I apologize.
No problem.
John, do you want to go ahead and go to slide 10? So I'm not exactly sure where I dropped out, and I apologize. If we look at some of the other upgrade options, test.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
I apologize, guys. So if we look at some of the side-by-side options, there's three major ones that we wanted to talk about today. We wanted to talk about the backup and the restore option, where you take it over and restore it to the new machine. The other option is to take and go ahead and to do a detach and attach option, which is very similar to the backup and restore. However, you're not using the traditional backup and restore commands. John will talk a little bit about that more in a few minutes. The one in particular that I wanted to talk about was with the mirroring option. And what the mirroring option is what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to minimize some of the downtime. It's one of the benefits that we have there. So if we look at the benefits in particular, one of the reasons I like to use the mirror option is because I can do a lot of the work that I would do for an upgrade before the upgrade even starts. So I can get the server that I'm upgrading to basically up to date. I can get the logins there and the jobs there, and you'll see that John will be able to do the same thing with the backup and the restore option. But the maintenance window that I'm going to need to actually do the upgrade is going to be much shorter. And I think that during the mirroring option, the upgrade itself is actually a lot easier because during the actual maintenance window, or during what I would call that stress time in particular, it's going to be, you're going to be able to script all those commands. It's one failover command, and then as the machine fails over, you're going to be able to do that upgrade right in place. The other thing, so when we start looking at some, and I'm sorry guys, this is so odd, the network dropping on me is kind of thrown a little wrench into my plans here. So when we start looking at some of the preparation options, some of the things that I'm going to do before the actual upgrade begins is I'm going to start to configure the new server. When I start to configure the new server, or the server that I'm upgrading to, I'm going to go in and do things like configuring the mail sessions, configuring the standard alerts that I usually put in place, any link servers that my production applications may need, memory settings. I'm going to get maintenance plans. Any of these maintenance plans that I may put in place, or jobs that I'm going to put in place, I'm going to make sure that these are disabled so that they're not running and failing before I'm actually ready to start moving over my production databases there. A little tip for you is when you start to look at moving the logins, you can use the SPRev login, and it'll actually script out your SQL Server logins for you, and you can move those over to the other server and execute them just in a regular script base. So when we get to the actual steps of and we're working with the individual databases, I'm going to create a mirror before the actual migration happens. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take the existing databases, I'm going to back them up, then I'm going to back up the transaction log, and then I'm going to restore those on the other server, and then start mirroring. What's interesting about this step here is, and what a lot of people may not understand, is that you can actually mirror from an older version of SQL Server to a newer version, and in many cases, or in all the cases that I've tested, is I can even skip versions. So for example, I can go from 2005 to 2008 R2, or maybe 2008 to 2012. The benefit of this is when we actually actually do the failover during the maintenance window portion of it, the upgrade's going to happen in place. And so it may take a little bit longer than your traditional failover, but what you're going to see is when the databases come up and the traffic is then routed to the new machine, you're actually going to be on the next version so during that failover. So like we started talking about during the execution period, what we're going to do is I'm going to declare a maintenance window. I'm going to go through and actually execute the failover or alter the database and set the mirroring over to move on to the 2014 box. Then I'm going to turn around and enable all of the jobs. Once we've got all the jobs enabled, I want to start testing everything. And then once we've got the OK, we're going to remove the mirror and declare that the upgrade is over. Excuse me. Go ahead and jump to the next one if you would, John. So once we're done actually moving from one to the other, then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that I've got some of my post activities completed. Some of these post activities are going to include, wanting to make sure the backup of the database is done. One of the negatives to using mirroring to upgrade your databases is going to be the simple fact that you can't, you're not going to be able to fail back real easily. You can't just fail the server back over because of the version change that's happened there. So I'm going to perform a backup. I'm going to go ahead and perform the regular maintenance that I would do other than backup. You may need to go ahead and reindex, update your statistics, get all that information ready so that when you're fully deployed into production on the new version, that you've got everything ready and the performance is all set. The other thing I would do is verify all your job executions, make sure that nothing has changed in between the different versions. You're going to be able to execute on the new server just like what you were able to in the older one. Make sure that you adjust all your documentation. When you start adjusting your documentation, after you're on the new server, you need to make sure that you're putting all of your documentation together. Make sure, sorry guys, I got a note here and got distracted. Make sure you adjust your DR plans. All your DR plans need to be taken into consideration, the new server names, new protocols for how to recover from those, and the whole 9 yards. Once you're done, make sure that you go ahead and adjust the compatibility level as well if you want to take advantage of some of the new feature sets. So John, I'm going to turn this over to you, and sorry, I know I'm giving it to you a little bit earlier than what we planned.
That's quite all right. I'm long-winded, so hopefully I can make up the time. So I want to talk about the backup and restore option for migrations. Chris obviously has gone over the mirroring aspect of doing the migration. I really like the backup and restore option just because it's really, really simple and it's really, really easy to recover. You heard Chris mention that trying to recover from a migration using mirroring is a little bit more complicated. You can't just easily flip a switch and reverse the direction and go back because you've upgraded the version. Whereas if you use the backup and restore option, it's a lot easier to recover from a failure in that migration process. So it's easier to recover. It's also a very simplistic movement of the database. It's a very simple backup and restore. I'm really hoping that all the DBAs out there are really comfortable with the database and restore it to a different server, potentially moving physical and logical file names around if needed, and doing not only just a full backup and a full restore, but also a full backup with differentials or transaction logs, however you see fit. And just like with Chris's migration option of mirroring, a lot of the heavy lifting you can do before the upgrade, before the maintenance window even starts. Depending on your environment, you can do it the days before, week before, whatever fits your schedule. In the environment that I work in, I'm very fortunate that I can do most of the heavy lifting a day or so before. And then the migration window is, the maintenance window is relatively small. My databases in my environment, we're not large. When I say large, probably 100 gigs or less is probably the average. If you work in an environment that is very, very large, terabyte-sized databases, backup and restore might be certainly an option for you, but I would definitely evaluate how fast you can restore and how that fits into your maintenance window. I'm also very lucky in that my maintenance window, usually most of my servers are down and not doing much processing by 7 p.m. Central Time. So my maintenance window is usually hours and not just 5 minutes or 10 minutes like some other environments are. So the other thing I like about the backup and restore option is that it allows me to restore the validation. You can do that with Chris's migration process as well, because you have to restore that database over there before you can start the mirroring. So the backup and restore option just validates that I've got a good backup. It allows me to practice my backups and then restore them, so it's kind of a twofold, two birds with one stone type deal. I can actually validate that my backup that I just took is good, it's valid. If I need to restore from a DR perspective, that backup is good. Now, there are, of course, side effects or downsides to any type of solution. And with the backup and restore option, it's most likely going to be a longer maintenance window. Depending on how big your databases are and to what level you want to restore to, you could be several minutes, hours, depending on all those factors. Whereas Chris's solution is going to be most likely very, very quick. When you fail over from the mirroring perspective, all it has to do is bring that database online, apply the transaction log, and away you go. So probably, if I had to guess, Chris's solution can be online in 60 seconds or less, give or take. Mine is going to be definitely longer than 60 seconds for the most part. So always side effects. But even with the backup and restore option, though, you'll notice that this screen, this slide, probably looks exactly like what Chris's slide did. Just like with the mirroring option and the backup and restore option, we're going to prepare the new server just the same way. We're going to configure DB mail, we're going to configure any alerts, we're going to worry about disk space and database sizing and database placement. We're going to worry about memory settings, any maintenance jobs that we need. One thing to keep note with the backup is, and actually in mirroring, is does your service account have, on the new server, have access to where the backup files are located? Can it get to that file structure to attach to the backup file, the full and the differential, and be able to restore them? That's one good thing about practice. Always practice so that you can find those issues up front. Logins, identical to Chris. We're gonna move the logins over if they have to. If they need to be moved over, then obviously move them over. Maybe you're using 2012 contained databases, which might be a different, a whole other beast to worry about. We're going to move any jobs. We're going to script them out, and we're going to make sure that we change the enabled option. So we're going to essentially disable them so that they don't run in the new environment. I have seen problems where we have scripted out jobs, moved them over, and lo and behold, they're still enabled, and they accidentally run. Thankfully, they did not cause any problems, but it's definitely something to watch out for. We're just going to basically pre-stage that job onto the new server so that it's there. Just like with Chris's solution, I script out everything. Just about 99.5% of the things that you can do in SQL Server, you can script out. I've seen some really strange things that people have been able to do on the internet that I didn't even know you could script out. But I always, regardless of what option I do, script it out so I can repeat it. I always want to test it many times, and scripting everything out really allows me to do that. So whatever solution you choose for your environment, make sure you script it out and test it. You're going to see me test. Yeah, you can see my next slide deck where I say test. So essentially the way this process works is sometime before the maintenance window, and you have to evaluate that for your environment, what that time is going to be. I'm going to take a full backup of my database, and I'm going to put it in a location. I usually will put it in the location where I take my normal backups. The reason I do that is so that way they will just fall right in line with my normal maintenance archival process. It's backed up to virtual tape, and it's all there if I need to restore back to it. Every now and then we'll have an instance where a backup is taken and it gets lost in the sea of UNC paths that are out there. So I always try to be very consistent where I put those backups, so I always know what they are. My archival process in my environment is excess of 10 days in terms of removing it from the file server. I'm not going to take a backup for a maintenance or a migration project any later, or need that backup any later than 10 days. So that's where I put my backups. So once I take the full backup, when the maintenance window rolls around, say 7 p.m. on a given day, given night, at that point in time, I'm going to have a communication with all my web admins, all my users, hopefully that you've communicated out this migration, and then we're going to stop all the application pools from the web servers. We're going to kill all the connections to the database. And once we've done that, what I do is I will set the database into single and or restricted user mode. Now what that does is, even though you've killed all the application pools and the connections, you still might have a lone wolf connection out there that is doing something to the database that you might not know. Hopefully everybody is looking and reviewing their security audits and knowing what user accounts are in there, who's got access to do what. But in the event that you don't know and you've got a lone wolf connection out there, if you set it to single user or restricted mode, you can kill those connections to make sure you have a single, or just those individuals that might be SA or DB creator have control of that particular database. And you can do that with, if you set that to single user restricted with rollback immediate, it'll actually immediately kill the connection. Any uncommitted transaction that they have, it'll stop them. Now there's a caveat to that. If you use single user mode, if you have the option auto update stats asynchronously turned on, you could run into gotchas with that, because the background thread that controls that might get that latch to that database without you knowing. So when you go to set it to single user mode and you do that, as soon as you do that, that background process will grab a hold of that database and you won't be able to do anything with it, which might be a problem. So just a note of warning that for you to go look at. So once I've got it into single user mode or restricted mode, at that point in time, all the connections are gone. Nobody else has access to the database but me and or my team of SA DBAs. I take a differential backup. And just as a refresher, a differential backup is all the pages in the database that have been changed since the last full. So if I had taken a full backup the previous day, the differential will be all the pages, the 8K pages in the database that were changed from the last time I took that full the day prior. So now I've got two backup files, a full backup and a differential, and I know what they are. So at that point in time, I actually will take the database offline. What that does is actually takes the database offline of SQL Server. The physical files are still there. The database is still there, but when you look in Management Studio, it's just going to say on the left-hand side there in the Object Explorer that the database is offline. Nobody can do anything with it until you either bring it online or you drop it or do whatever you want to do. The reason I do that is that way I always ensure that no other transactions can happen to that database without me doing something to it. That way I'm trying to keep the data consistent between the two databases, the old version on, say, 2012 and the new version on 2014. So once I ensure that I have the database offline, and one caveat about that, if you have to restore and you bring the database back online, odds are it's going to be still in single user and or restricted mode. That option of the database is a page level setting, and it's going to be still there when you bring it back online. So if you bring it back online, you might have to remember to set it back to multi-user mode so that your applications and your users can get back into it if you have to recover from the migration. So, excuse me. So once I have the database offline, I'm actually ready to start the migration process to the new server. And when I do that, I will actually restore the full backup that I took in the day before onto the new server with no recovery. So I mentioned that I'd taken the full backup the day before. I'm going to restore that on the new server. I can do that right away. I can do it 10 minutes before the maintenance window. I can do it whenever I want. It really depends on how long you think that restore is going to take. Again, I want to practice this, so I'm going to have a pretty good idea that if my database is 100 gigs with the disk subsystem that I've got, I can restore that database in 15, 20, 30, 40, however many minutes. So I can gauge where, at the very latest, where I need to start that restore so that I'm ready to roll when that maintenance window rolls around. So I move over to the new server, and I've already had that full backup restored and ready to go. It is sitting there with a no recovery option. So SQL Server is just sitting there going, hey, I'm in no recovery mode. I'm waiting for the next restore. Give it to me before I can come online. At that point in time, I'm going to restore the differential with a recovery option and essentially bringing the database up to the differential level of when I took the differential backup of the old version copy. And as I mentioned there, test. Both Chris and I are huge proponents of testing the migration in any way, shape, or form. Test it. Don't test it once. Test it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times until you are absolutely sure that you've got all the bugs and kinks worked out. And not only test it, but when you do the migration and you're ready to bring it online, I will bring it online, and usually I'll work with my web admins who are great folks that have the ability to allow only certain users to get in, and we will test. We will test the ever-loving snot out of that database to make sure that the migration didn't cause any issues that we weren't prepared for. So we won't actually open the floodgates to the end users or the world until my testers, my QA department says, yep, we're good, we're ready to go. At that point in time, we'll be ready to roll. We'll open the floodgates, and of course we'll monitor accordingly. Do you have your connections set up to monitor? Do you have any type of web performance monitoring tools to watch? Do you have any third-party tools like SQL Sentry or Idera that can watch your SQL maintenance or your SQL instance performance to make sure that you're not introducing worse I/O problems on your new server? So hopefully you're upgrading hardware, so your new hardware will be faster and bigger and better, and you won't be introducing anything like that. But so I love presentations that give me code, especially if you're not familiar with doing backups and restores via code. I do find DBAs that use nothing but the UI, and so I love giving code back out. So here's an example code that I kind of threw together just to show how easy it is to do the migration. So in this example code, you can see here that I use tempdb. Whoops, I am click happy apparently. And this code is assuming that you've already taken the full backup prior to the maintenance window beginning. I didn't include that version of the code just to save slide deck space, but you can certainly modify this differential backup to be a full backup too if you need to. But here you can see that I set the alter. I have a scratch database, and hopefully everybody has a scratch database to play around with. Don't play around with production. I have seen it. Don't recommend it. But so I take the scratch database, set it to restricted user with rollback immediate, which remember will kill all the connections just to make sure and ensure that I've got the sole connection to that database so I can do stuff with it and not worry about data transactions coming in that I have to try to finagle later. I'll take a differential backup, obviously with differential compression stats equals 5. The default is stats equals 10. I'm paranoid. I want to see SQL Server tell me more often that it's actually doing the backup that I wanted. Now, if you're on 2005 or lower, or excuse me, yeah, 2005 or lower, compression probably won't be an option for you. Hopefully you've set your instance level default to always do backup compression, but in case you haven't, you can use the compression option there in the backup command. And then I set the database offline. So at this point in time, I've got my full backup, I've got my differential backup at the time of the maintenance window, and I know that the old version of the database is completely offline and no data transactions will be transpiring in that database unless I bring it back online. So I know for sure that nothing's going to happen in that thing until I'm ready. And then on the new server, I'm going to go restore the full backup that I took from disk, some UNC pass, some location that you've got. And I'm going to say no recovery. You can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but with no recovery, stats equals 5. And I'm going to move the logical file where I need it. If you set up your servers the same, where the old server physical file structure is matches the new server file structure, you might not have to do the move. In my environment, the older servers are usually a chaotic mess of file structure, so I usually have to do a move. And then once that recovery is done, the SQL Server is going to be sitting there nice and happy, just in recovery mode, not going to be able to do anything with the database. It's still waiting for the next restore to come along to bring it online. I'm going to specify restore database from scratch, and same thing from the UNC path. And I'm still going to say with no recovery. The reason being is that I've gotten the habit of I want to specify when it's going to do the recovery. If you don't specify no recovery, the default is with recovery, and it'll actually bring the database online. So if nothing else out of this slide deck, you want to make sure that you always have the no recovery in the first two options. Actually, the first option is the most critical one. The second option, if you were to bring the database online after the differential restore, that's probably okay. The third command that you see there, the restore database scratch with no recovery, that'll actually bring the database online. It'll do all its roll forwards and rollbacks that it needs to do. And the database will then be online and ready for applications to start hitting it. At that point in time, so we've got the old version offline. It's just sitting there nice and happy. You can sit there and wait till weeks down the road when everything is verified and everybody's happy. You can drop it later. But just like Chris's migration, we're going to do the exact same stuff in the backup and restore option as Chris did. So after the upgrade is done and we're ready to roll, one of the first things I do is I want to back up that database. While I could perform the migration again, if I back up the database, then I know that I've got another good backup of the new version. Backups are very, very important as a life of the DBA, so I will back it up. I'll perform any maintenance, just like what Chris will do. Rebuild any indexes, check stats, check permissions, check the job history, see if there's anything running, verify that the jobs ran, check configs. My environment uses SSIS pretty heavily, so I'm going to check all the SSIS configurations to make sure they're pointed in the right direction, any gotchas. I'm going to update my documentation. I'm definitely going to update, hey, we moved it from this version of, from 2005 up to 2014. These are the things that we changed in the flight. I'm definitely going to adjust all my DR plans. DR is just as important as backups, and I'm going to make sure that not only all of my documentation and plans are up to date, I'm going to make sure that my new DR servers are up to date. Do you have a DR server available that's 2012 or 2014, whatever version you might be going to? Make sure those servers are configured correctly, and those are included in the new DR plans. And just like Chris, I'm really going to make sure that the compatibility mode is updated. By default, when you migrate from one version of SQL Server to another, it does not upgrade the compatibility mode. So if you went from 2005, which is 90, to 2008, which I think is a 100, when you do that migration, SQL Server will leave it in that 90 mode until you're ready to change it. The migration will upgrade the database internal structure to the new version, but the compatibility mode will allow you to use certain features of SQL Server, some code syntax, and some other stuff as it was running in the previous version. So I'm kind of in the habit, unless there's a drastic need to keep it in the old compatibility mode, I will make sure to upgrade that in the new version. You can do that via script or via the UI. So I know we just gave a bunch of information, so we're getting pretty close to the Q&A session. But just to wrap up, both Chris and I have the exact same pre-upgrade steps. Configure the new server, check for memory, logins, jobs. Chris had mentioned SSIS, and the reason that was there on that slide deck was you can use SSIS to do some of the migration work, but also if you have SSIS or maybe SSRS or analysis services, or you're big into BI and you're using Excel and Power BI and all the wonderful goodness that is, make sure all the connections are up to date and configured correctly. The major differences between the two options, as Chris mentioned, he can do his very, very quickly. The actual process of the migration from old version to new version happens very, very quickly. And mirroring is very versatile from what I can see. I believe that you can do it from domains and do some other stuff, some really, really cool, slick stuff with it. Recoverability, it's harder to recover from mirroring, whereas doing it from a backup and restore option, I can recover a lot easier, most likely, because all it is simply taking the new version offline, bring the old one online, change all your connections, and bring the applications back online, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, you would test and verify and document the issues and all that. So major differences, maintenance windows, and recoverability. I'm all about trying to recover, so almost every solution that I choose when doing migrations, sometimes I will do mirroring. Most of the time I'll do the backup and restore option just because I can recover faster. And for me, it's about getting back online as quickly as possible. So in my environment right now, backup and restores offers me that greatest flexibility. So always document your steps. With any migration, it's never a Ronco set it and forget it type of deal. Document your steps, repeat it over and over and over again. Practice, practice, practice. If anybody has ever seen me present in person, just about every presentation I have says practice, 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 practice something. Whether it's backups and restores or your check DBs or your security audits or whatever, always document your steps, practice them, make sure you've got them all ironed out, do your best to get any potential issues squared away. Follow up with any maintenance issues and or items. As both Chris and I mentioned, make sure you're doing check DBs, index defrags, statistics checks, all the good stuff that you should be doing as a good little DBA. There's tons of blog posts out there. Review what worked. That's really critical. Do a post analysis to find out whether or not did the migration go as planned? Did you have a hiccup? If you had a hiccup, what was it? Were you able to resolve it right then and there? Because you never know, that same hiccup might not occur the next time you do that process for whatever reason. So review what worked, make adjustments, and then move on. One migration might be a backup and restore because it's a smaller database, or you might have a very large database that's highly volatile with lots of data transactions where a mirroring option is going to be better. So even though Chris and I have two varying ideas in terms of how we like to do our upgrades, either solution will work for your environment. There's going to be a way to do it. And his way is not necessarily right, and my way is not necessarily right. There's always more than one way to do a solution in SQL Server. So look at your options, see what works, test them out. If you want to test out the mirroring versus the backup and restore, if you have the environment to do that, go for it. Highly, highly recommend that you do that. So at this point in time, I'm actually wrapping up right at the Q&A mark from my understanding. I think I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Perfect timing. Thank you, John.
I like it when a plan comes together.
John, Chris, thank you so much for your presentation. I've got a number of questions for you, and I'm going to ask you these questions, and hopefully we can treat it like we're talking casually at the past summit in one of the evening events. So question number one, I think it's going to be directed to Chris Shaw actually first. When you were talking about database mirroring as an option for doing the work that you went into, the question that's been asked by Sergio is, can this involve asynchronous mirroring?
Hi, Sergio. First, thank you for your question and hanging in with the technical difficulties on my part of the presentation. The big difference between the asynchronous and the synchronous is you're going to be wanting to protect the data with the synchronous and making sure that that's a key thing during the actual upgrade process. So I would highly recommend, and I think it's going to actually require it, that when you do the actual failover, you stay in the synchronous mode, not the asynchronous mode.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. Sergio, I hope that answers your question. We've had a couple of people asking the next question, and I had a conversation with Renee Maguire during your presentation, and Umesh Patel has asked exactly the same question. So this is to both of you. If you're moving how do you deal with the server name changing for the user and applications? Let's give you an example. Let's say I'm moving to a new server called Server 2, but your old server was called Server 1. The users are still going to have connections to the old server names, especially if those server names are hard-coded into the application. Is there any special considerations or any way you would attack that particular problem during an upgrade?
Chris, do you want that one, or?
Do you want to? Sure, I can jump on it. So the way that I like to do it historically, or what I find that works really well traditionally, is I like to work with DNS a lot. It gives me the flexibility so that I can make name changes behind the scenes. So I might be able to go in and start having people, before we even start to do the actual migration and the pre-step, I may have people make an entry in DNS and have it point to server 1. And let's just call the DNS entry like production, so that I know that during the actual migration, like whether or not I'm doing a failover or we're doing the backup and the restore method, we can go ahead and make the adjustment into DNS, start pointing all the traffic at server 2 or at the new server, and then we can simply go in and go shut server 1 down or stop the service, and that's going to ensure that we've been able to get all those connections taken care of. The big thing about that is to remember the time to live, because you want to make sure that you're not keeping those DNS entries around long term.
So Chris, is it fair to say, are you using canonical name, a CNAME records in DNS?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So fundamentally, you're managing the CNAME record to provide that layer of abstraction within DNS to point between the two servers as and when you want. But is it fair to say, do you kind of reduce the TTL value of that literally as you're close to doing that changeover, so that you've got the old record in DNS and then there's a very short TTL switches over?
Exactly. We'll do it. So, you know, if the existing DTL, time to live, if the existing one was, let's say, 24 hours, you know, we'll go slightly just over the 24-hour mark and shrink it down. And we may make that adjustment 2 or 3 times.
Perfect. Perfect. That's brilliant.
And I want to jump in real quick. I would also concur with Chris's. Using DNS is really, really helpful and really, really critical.
No, absolutely. And John, just to continue this a little bit, I've heard you say practice, 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 test, test, test. But I'm guessing for something like this kind of change, we need to plan, plan, plan as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you want to be liaising with your project managers to get that in the plan so we do it in a timely manner.
Yeah, you definitely want to get all the key players involved, your project managers, your business analysts, your business owners, with the web admins, the sysadmins, all the right people involved. Get them all in the room and make sure you definitely plan. I'm a firm believer of if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
No, perfect, perfect, excellent. Another question that I've got is, are there any special problems in skipping many versions of SQL Server? So the example given was from 2000 to 2012, but I know that, you know, we had a conversation. This is from Andrew Notarian. Thank you very much for your question. I mean, a jump from 2000 to 2012 would be really impossible, and you're probably on hardware that's so old that you're probably going to do a clean install and move it. But are there any considerations that we need to consider with smaller jumps, let's say 2008 R2 to 2014?
Well, I think with the 2000 to any version, I'm fairly certain you have to jump to, say, 2005 Service Pack 4, and then you can jump to a newer version. I don't see any. Go ahead.
Is it worth it
to do the small jump?
Even to do the small jump from 2000 to 2005 and then up again, is that worth it?
I think that you have to. I think the migration path, it's been a long time since I've played with 2000, I'll admit, but I'm pretty sure that the migration path is that you have to jump from 2000 to 2005, potentially Service Pack 4, before you can make the next jump from 2005 Service Pack 4 straight to 2014 or 2012. Once you get up to the 2005, 2008 range, then you can start doing your your bigger, longer jumps to the newer versions. I'm not sure that, depending on what your needs are,
Yeah.
I definitely would support going from, say, 2008 straight to 2012 or 2014. If you have the hardware and the licensing and all that meet your needs, and there's nothing in between that is specific that you need for your environment, might as well go all the way and get to the newest version.
Okay, so there's no real special problems to consider with this, but just basically, you know, make the appropriate steps and also follow the contents in your slide with regards to moving across the relevant SQL Server objects between those different versions. Is that fair summary?
Sorry, Chris, I lost you.
I do apologise. Yeah, to follow on from that is essentially, you know, there's no real special problems, but essentially you might do the relevant jumps that you need to make and then just move across the object as shown in your slide deck.
I think when I listened to, you know, the different answer that, you know, John gave, the one thing I would want to highlight is every time you jump a version, you're adding new variables into this, you know, and different feature sets and the way that different versions handle different things. And if really you do have that drastic of a step, I think I would want to recommend, you know, I guess more recent versions, like, you know, going from 2008 to 2012 or, you know, R2 to 2014, you're probably not going to see as many major differences in the, even though there are major differences in the upgrade in the versions, I don't think you're going to see as many problems.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Matthew Cairns, I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly there, Matthew. What steps go into a successful migration from a standard 2012 or earlier standard table to a 2014 in-memory table with respect to the migration steps? Is this
that's an interesting question. What was the gentleman's name?
Matthew Kearns. I mean, we could get him to reach out to you when you show your contact details here.
Yeah, I am not comfortable answering that question. Matthew, I'm not sure that I know. I would love to find out for you and have a chat with you about it, though. Chris, do you know? Do we lose Chris?
No, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I keep going on mute. I think something's wrong with my mic here. The only thing that's kind of coming to mind is I think you're not only are you doing a version upgrade and potentially a hardware upgrade, but a design upgrade as well. I mean, it would be interesting, you know, to see that complete flow process, but I would break it out into individual parts.
Okay, cool. Mikhail Kavutsky, I hope I pronounced that right, Mikhail. He's got a great question here. In case of upgrade in place from SQL 2008 R2 to 2014, would you recommend a hop to 2012 first? So that relates to a question asked earlier. However, what's really good about the question is, do you have any thoughts or comments for servers that have replication configured?
Is the question, did you say replication, Chris?
Let me repeat it. In case of an upgrade, in case of an in-place upgrade from SQL 2008 R2 to 2014, would you recommend an upgrade to 2012 first? That's the first question. And the second part is, are there any specific thoughts or comments for servers that would have replication configured on that instance?
I'll make my comments real quick, and then maybe you might have something to add, John. As far as in place versus doing a side-by-side upgrade, if replication is involved, that comes with its own interesting set of, how do you say, its own paradigm. So I think I would recommend that if you were to do an upgrade with replication, because you're going to change the publisher location, you could potentially be changing the hardware. I would definitely consider re-snapshotting and rebuilding that replication.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just trying to make sense. Matthew Kearns has sent through his email address, so I'll make sure you guys get that. Suresh Babu, I hope I've got your name right there, sir. He's got a good question. What's the rollback strategy in case the in-place upgrade fails?
That's a really good question.
It's an awesome question.
In my opinion,
that's one of the reasons why I don't recommend in-place.
Absolutely, and I was just going to say that that's one of the reasons I don't recommend it either, because rolling back from a failure of in-place upgrade is extremely difficult. You could spend hours, days, weeks trying to troubleshoot where the problem lies. You actually might be better to nuke and pave the server in terms of SQL Server and start over and restore master, restore model, restore all your databases, and have that DR plan in place. Say again?
That will be painful.
It would be extremely painful. That's why Chris and I both agree that in-place upgrades are painful and have a high risk potential of having problems. And like I said, you can spend hours and days trying to troubleshoot where that problem might lie.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
I just think of each of the individual components that are involved in an upgrade. When you have to upgrade the executables, you have to upgrade the, then you have to upgrade the system catalogs, and then you have to turn around and upgrade the user databases. And an in-place upgrade is going to do all of those in one step. You don't have that control that you do when you do a side-by-side, or, that's...
And it could be further compounded if you've got sys packages on there that are being upgraded as well, which is something to consider. I'm going to finish off with two more questions as we're coming to the top of the hour. Yeah, the question is from Dave Mathian. I hope I pronounced that right. Any tips for migrating to different domains in the same forest? I mean, for me, I think the immediate issue is you're going to have to consider renewing SIDs as you move the server across domains on top of what you've mentioned already.
Yeah, the SIDs will be taken care of with the SP helpful, with the script that we supplied to move the logins. That'll take the SIDs over as well.
Okay, cool.
I think that's a conversation that you'd have to have with your AD admins.
I think it's a great example of why you want to test, though, everything, because it's one of those where, there may be something. I've never had to do that upgrade path. I don't know if John has, but that's going to be one of those things where it's going to, you want to ferret out any potential obstacles that you're going to have migration day.
No, absolutely. If the SQL Server is a virtual machine recovery, sorry, let's read that again. Is it possible to recover a SQL Server performing an impulse upgrade that is in a virtual machine? I'm guessing John is referring to snapshotting and the virtual capabilities that are available. So, I mean, I would snapshot beforehand anyway.
Yeah, adding virtualization underneath the hood does make things easier. Chris is correct. You could just do a virtual snapshot. And if you don't have the ability to do that, talk to your VM admins, and they can probably do that for you. That definitely will make a in-place upgrade easier to restore back to, because then you can just restore back to that snapshot and come back online.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. It is now on the hour, and basically we just have one more slide to show you. John, if you could move that, please. Thanks again for attending this session. Please remember to use your discount code 24HOT14 to get your $200 discount. And on the final slide, stay tuned for our next session, Zero to Hero with PowerShell and SQL Server, with Robert Kern, Bradley Ball, and Jason Strait, happening now. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.